The Velthari Dominion was the most feared force in the galaxy. For over 1,000 years, they had swept through star system after star system, crushing anyone who dared to resist. 47 worlds had fallen to their might, and not once had they lost even a single ship. Their vessels were things of terrible beauty, made from living crystal that could repair itself, powered by energy sources that human science couldn't even begin to understand. These weren't just warships. They were floating fortresses, each one carrying enough firepower to turn an entire planet into molten glass. The aliens who built them were tall, graceful beings who looked down on other species as nothing more than insects to be stepped on, or pets to be kept. They had never met anyone who could challenge them, and they liked it that way. Admiral Corvex stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at the small blue planet that filled the main screen. His skin had a metallic sheen, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of centuries of life and countless victories. The name, the Eternal, wasn't just a title. He had been leading fleets for 300 years, and he had never tasted defeat. "What do we know about this world?" he asked his second-in-command, a younger officer whose crystalline armor caught the light from the ship's walls. "The usual primitive setup, sir. They still burn chemicals to move their ships around. Their weapons are crude metal projectiles and simple explosives. They can't even leave their own star system properly yet. Most interesting thing about them is how divided they are. Hundreds of different governments all fighting each other instead of working together." Corvex nodded slowly. It was always the same story. Every species they encountered was either already united under one ruler or so, busy fighting amongst themselves that conquest was almost too easy. "How long for complete subjugation?" 3 days at most, sir. Maybe less if they surrender quickly." Meanwhile, on the other side of the solar system, Dr. Minho Kim was having the worst night of his life. He had been working late at the Sol Observatory, checking data from the deep space monitoring systems, when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The objects moving toward Earth weren't natural. They moved in perfect formation, slowing down and speeding up together, like a flock of birds. But these birds were the size of mountains. Minho rubbed his tired eyes and checked the readings again. No mistake. 50 massive objects, each one bigger than the largest building on Earth, were heading straight for them. They would arrive in less than 6 hours. "Gina!" he shouted across the laboratory. Dr. Gina Park looked up from her computer, annoyed at being interrupted. She was a brilliant astrophysicist who had worked with Minho for 5 years, and she could tell from his voice that something was seriously wrong. "What is it?" she asked, hurrying over to his station. "Look at these readings. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me these are just asteroids or space junk or anything normal." Gina studied the data for several minutes, her face growing paler with each passing second. "These are artificial. They have to be. The way they move, the energy signatures. Minho, I think we're looking at alien spacecraft." Within an hour, every major government on Earth was in emergency session. The initial reaction was disbelief, then panic, then a desperate scramble to figure out what to do. Some leaders wanted to try communicating with the visitors. Others wanted to attack immediately. Most just wanted to hide and hope the aliens would go away. The aliens didn't go away. Instead, they took up positions around Earth's moon and sent a message that every radio, television, and internet connection on the planet received at exactly the same time. The voice was cold and mechanical, speaking in perfect English, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, and a dozen other languages simultaneously. "People of the third planet, you will surrender your world to the Velthari Dominion within 1 rotation of your planet. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species. You have been warned." To show they meant business, the aliens turned their weapons on 3 large asteroids in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. The rocks simply vanished in flashes of blue light so bright they could be seen from Earth without a telescope. The message was clear. This is what would happen to Earth if humanity didn't give up. In military command centers around the world, generals and admirals stared at their screens in horror and helplessness. General Daehyun Choi sat in the underground bunker beneath Seoul, watching as his most advanced missiles bounced off the alien ships like rubber balls. The enemy shields didn't even flicker. "Sir," his aide reported, The Americans tried hitting them with everything they have. Nuclear missiles, electromagnetic pulse bombs, even experimental laser weapons. Nothing worked. Their shields absorbed everything we threw at them. Across the Pacific, Admiral Sunmi Lee was having the same conversation in the Pentagon's crisis room. "How long do we have?" she asked her staff. 22 hours and counting, ma'am. After that. But General Dae-hyun was thinking differently than most of the other military leaders. While they saw only hopelessness, he saw opportunity. "They're playing with us," he said quietly, studying the tactical displays. "They could have destroyed us already, but they didn't. They want us to surrender, which means they need something from us. Maybe they need the planet intact, or maybe they want us alive for some reason." He stood up and began pacing around the room. "But here's what they don't understand about humans. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know how to fight dirty, how to adapt, how to survive when everything looks hopeless. And they just made one huge mistake." "What mistake, sir?" Dae-hyun smiled grimly. "They gave us time to prepare. 24 hours might not seem like much, but it's enough. Enough to get angry, enough to get organized, and enough to show them what happens when you threaten the human race." All across Earth, humanity began to move with a purpose the aliens had never seen before. The scattered fighting governments that the Velthari had dismissed as weak and divided suddenly began working together with frightening efficiency. Ancient enemies shared technology and resources. Military forces that had been pointing weapons at each other for decades turned those same weapons toward the sky. The countdown had begun, and humanity was getting ready to show the galaxy what they were really made of. 24 hours came and went. The world held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do. The aliens expected either complete surrender or total chaos as governments collapsed and people fled in panic. What they got instead was something they had never seen before in their 1,000 years of conquest. Silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of a predator getting ready to strike. Every military base on Earth went dark. Communication. Channels that had been buzzing with desperate chatter suddenly went quiet. The Velthari monitoring systems detected massive movement of human forces, but it wasn't the chaotic retreat they expected. It was organized, purposeful, and deadly serious. Admiral Korvex stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays with growing confusion. "They should be begging for mercy by now," he said to his second-in-command. "Every other species we've conquered was either surrendering or tearing itself apart within hours of our arrival." "Perhaps they don't understand the hopelessness of their situation," the younger officer suggested. "Should we send another message?" Korvex's eyes narrowed. These humans were proving more stubborn than he had anticipated. In his experience, a demonstration of overwhelming force usually broke the spirit of any resistance, but these creatures seemed to be getting more organized, not less. "No more messages. It's time to show them what happens to those who defy the Dominion." The target he chose was Geneva, Switzerland. It wasn't the largest city on Earth, but it was symbolic, home to many international organizations, a place where humans tried to solve their problems through talking rather than fighting. Korvex thought destroying it would send the perfect message about the futility of resistance. The attack came without warning. A single beam of blue energy, thin as a pencil but carrying the power of a star, lanced down from the alien flagship. Geneva simply ceased to exist. The entire city, along with 200,000 people, vanished in a pillar of fire that could be seen from space. The ground where the city had stood was turned to glass, perfectly smooth and still glowing from the heat. The aliens waited for humanity's spirit to break. They expected global panic, mass surrenders, and the collapse of human civilization. Instead, they got something far more dangerous. They got humanity truly angry for the first time. The response was immediate and terrifying in its efficiency. Within 1 hour of Geneva's destruction, every major military installation on Earth was coordinating together. Countries that had been enemies for decades suddenly shared their most classified weapons technology. Nuclear arsenals that had been pointed at each other for generations all turned toward the sky. But it wasn't just the military response that shocked the aliens. It was how ordinary people reacted. Instead of fleeing in terror, humans began volunteering for the most dangerous missions imaginable. Pilots who had never seen combat stepped forward to fly experimental spacecraft. Engineers worked around the clock to convert civilian ships into weapons. Even children helped by carrying supplies and delivering messages. The Velthari had seen desperate last stands before, but never anything like this. These humans weren't just fighting for their lives. They were fighting with a cold, calculated fury that chilled even battle-hardened alien warriors. Captain Hyunwoo. Park had been flying experimental fighters for the Korean Air Force for 10 years. He was one of the best pilots in the world, but he had never expected to receive the orders that came through his radio that morning. His squadron, Talon 7, had been selected for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. "All pilots, this is command," the voice crackled through his headset. "We're loading your fighters with fusion warheads. Your target is the alien flagship. This is a one-way trip." Hyunwoo looked at his wingman, Lieutenant Soyeon-yu, flying in formation beside him. She was only 26 years old, one of the youngest pilots in the squadron, but she had already proven herself as one of the most skilled. Through his cockpit window, he could see her giving him a thumbs up. "You understand what this means?" He radioed to her privately. "I understand perfectly, Captain," Soyeon replied, her voice steady and calm. "They killed 200,000 innocent people. They think we'll just roll over and die. Time to show them how wrong they are." The mission was insane by any normal standard. The plan was to load their fighters with the most powerful nuclear weapons humanity had ever built, then fly straight into the alien flagship's shields at maximum speed. The hope was that the sheer velocity and explosive power would be enough to punch through their defenses. Every pilot in Talon 7 volunteered. Not one of them hesitated when they learned it was a suicide mission. They had all seen the footage from Geneva. The families who had been vaporized in an instant, the children who would never grow up, the future that had been stolen from humanity. "For Geneva," Soyeon said simply as they prepared for launch. "For Geneva," Hyunwoo agreed. The fighters launched from a secret base in the mountains of South Korea. They flew low and fast, using Earth's atmosphere to mask their approach from alien sensors. When they finally climbed toward space, they were moving faster than any human-built aircraft had ever flown before. The alien flagship detected them when they were still thousands of kilometers away. The Velthari couldn't believe what they were seeing. Tiny human spacecraft flying straight at their most powerful warship with no apparent regard for their own survival. "Should we destroy them?" asked Korvex's tactical officer. "No," the admiral replied, curious despite himself. "Let's see what they think they can accomplish with those primitive craft." It was the last mistake he would ever make. Captain Hyunwoo's fighter, loaded with 3 fusion warheads and traveling at nearly the speed of sound, struck the alien flagship's shields like a bullet hitting glass. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the warheads detonated all at once, creating a miniature sun in the vacuum of space. The explosion tore through the alien ship's command section like paper. Systems that had been built to last for centuries were shredded in milliseconds. The flagship, pride of the Velthari fleet, began tumbling out of control toward Earth's atmosphere. Admiral Korvex, thrown from his feet by the impact, pulled himself up to see his command center in ruins around him. Half his crew was dead, his ship was dying, and the humans had accomplished something no enemy had ever done before. They had damaged a Velthari flagship. "Evacuate to the secondary command vessel," he ordered, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Quickly, before the ship breaks apart." As he was transported to another ship in his fleet, Korvex stared at the wreckage of his flagship as it burned up in Earth's atmosphere. In 300 years of warfare, he had never seen anything like what these humans had just done. They had sacrificed their own lives without hesitation, turning their primitive craft into weapons of incredible destructive power. "No civilized species fights like this," he whispered to himself. "They fight like they have nothing left to lose." What the Admiral didn't understand was that humanity had just discovered something about itself that it had never known before. When pushed to the edge of extinction, humans didn't break. They became something far more dangerous than any alien invader could imagine. The war had truly begun. The smoking wreckage of the alien flagship crashed into the Pacific Ocean with the force of a small asteroid. Within hours, Every submarine, salvage ship, and deep-sea vessel that humanity could find was racing toward the crash site. What they found there would change the course of the entire war. Major Ji-hoon Kwon had been leading military recovery operations for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The alien ship was massive, even in ruins, bigger than 3 aircraft carriers put together. Most of it had been destroyed in the crash, but large sections were still intact, filled with technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever built. "Be careful with everything," he radioed to his dive teams as they explored the wreckage. "We don't know what any of this stuff does, and we can't afford to break it." The first thing that caught everyone's attention was how different the alien technology looked. Instead of metal and wires like human machines, everything was made from what looked like living crystal. The walls seemed to pulse with their own inner light, and some of the damaged systems were actually trying to repair themselves. Engineer Minji Song was one of the first people to figure out how the alien systems worked. She had spent her whole career designing computer systems for spacecraft, and she had a gift for understanding how complex machines fit together. When she first saw the alien control panels, she spent 3 days just staring at them, trying to figure out the logic behind their design. "It's incredible," she explained to the team of scientists and engineers who had gathered around the salvaged alien computer core. "Their whole approach to technology is completely different from ours. We build machines to do specific jobs. This computer controls navigation, that one handles weapons, another one manages life support. But their systems are all connected, like one giant brain that controls everything at once." Dr. Johan Lee, a physicist from Seoul National University, shook his head in amazement. "The power source alone should be impossible. These crystals are generating more energy than a nuclear reactor, but there's no radiation, no waste heat, nothing. It's like they've found a way to tap directly into the fundamental forces of the universe." But Minji was more interested in something else she had discovered. "The really amazing thing is that we can actually interface with their systems. Look at this." She connected a standard human computer cable to what looked like a smooth crystal surface. Immediately, data began flowing between the two systems. "How is that possible?" asked Major Ji-hoon. "I think their technology is designed to adapt to whatever it encounters," Minji replied, her voice filled with excitement. "It's not just advanced, it's smart. It learns how to communicate with other systems automatically." This discovery changed everything. Within days, teams of engineers and scientists from around the world were working together to understand alien technology. They started with small things, figuring out how the alien power crystals worked, learning to read their computer displays, understanding their weapon systems. What they found was both terrifying and hopeful. The aliens' weapons were far more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. But their technology wasn't magic. It followed rules that human science could understand, even if those rules were much more advanced than anything Earth had discovered. The breakthrough came when Minji figured out how to make human computers talk to alien systems. Once that connection was established, human programmers could actually control alien technology. It was like learning to drive a car that was centuries more advanced than anything you'd ever seen, but the basic principles were still the same. Within weeks, something incredible began happening all across Earth. Human ships started appearing that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Old cargo vessels were retrofitted with alien power sources that made them faster than military fighters. Communication satellites were upgraded with alien sensors that could track enemy ships from millions of kilometers away. Even civilian spacecraft were being converted into weapons of war. The transformation wasn't just limited to military vessels. Mining ships that had spent decades hauling rocks in the asteroid belt suddenly found themselves equipped with weapons that could punch through alien armor. Space stations became fortified battle platforms. Even small private spacecraft were being loaded with nuclear warheads and piloted by volunteers on one-way missions. Commander Yunha Nam had been captain of the cargo ship Incheon's Pride for 8 years. It was a good ship, reliable, sturdy, designed to carry supplies between Earth and the mining colonies. She had never expected to find herself commanding a warship, but that's exactly what had happened. The conversion had taken 3 weeks. Her old cargo holds were now filled with alien power crystals and human-built weapon systems. The engine that had once pushed containers of food and equipment now drove a ship that could outrun military destroyers. Most importantly, the main cargo bay now housed a salvaged alien energy cannon that could punch a hole through a mountain. Her crew was just as transformed as her ship. They were former merchant sailors, cargo handlers, and transport pilots who had learned to operate alien technology through pure determination and desperate need. None of them had military training, but they had something just as valuable. They were absolutely furious about what had happened to Geneva, and they were ready to make the aliens pay for it. "Captain," her first officer Tae Woo reported, "we're approaching the alien formation. 15 enemy ships, arranged in their standard battle pattern." Shona studied the tactical display, which now showed a mixture of human and alien sensor data. The enemy ships were beautiful and terrible, crystalline vessels that looked like deadly works of art floating in the void. 6 months ago, the sight of them would have filled her with helpless terror. Now she felt only cold determination. "All ships, this is Eunha," she broadcast to the other converted vessels in her small fleet. "Remember, these aliens think we're just primitives with crude weapons. They're about to learn how wrong they are, target their formation flanks, hit them fast and hard before they can adapt to our new capabilities." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the history of warfare. Human ships that looked like floating junkyards engaged alien vessels that seemed to be made of pure light and crystal. But the humans had advantages the aliens had never encountered before. They were using the enemy's own technology against them, and they were fighting with the fury of a species that had nothing left to lose. The Incheon's Pride fired its main weapon, and an alien destroyer simply ceased to exist, vaporized by its own technology turned against it. Around her, other converted human ships were doing the same thing, using alien weapons with human tactics and human desperation. The Velthari had conquered 47 star systems, but they had never faced an enemy like this. These humans didn't just adapt to new technology. They improved it, modified it, and turned it into something even more dangerous than the original. They took mining equipment and made it into kinetic weapons. They converted communication systems into targeting networks. They turned every piece of civilian infrastructure into a potential tool of war. Most terrifying of all, they did it faster than the aliens could counter it. By the time the Velthari figured out how to defend against one human innovation, the E, humans had already moved on to something else entirely. The war was changing, and for the first time in their long history of conquest, the Velthari were starting to realize they might not win. The emergency beacon reached the main Velthari battle fleet 3 weeks after the first engagement at Earth. Admiral Zephyros the Conqueror, commander of 200 warships and veteran of countless victories, received the distress signal with complete disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered, staring at the message displayed on his crystalline command screen. "Admiral Corvex is requesting immediate reinforcement. His entire advance fleet has been, what does this say, neutralized by primitive humans?" His second-in-command, a younger officer named Vextar, studied the tactical reports with growing alarm. "Sir, according to these logs, they've lost 38 ships in just 3 weeks. The humans appear to be using our own technology against us." Zephyros had served the Dominion for 400 years. He had seen species fight back before, some with courage, some with desperation, a few with surprising cleverness. But none had ever managed to actually defeat Velthari forces in open combat. The idea that a primitive species still using chemical rockets could destroy advanced crystalline warships was beyond his understanding. "Prepare the fleet for immediate jump to the human system," he ordered. "We'll show these creatures what happens when they dare to resist the Dominion." But when the reinforcement fleet arrived at Earth's solar system, what they found was not at all what they expected. Instead of a broken enemy begging for mercy, they discovered that the humans had transformed their entire region of space into a fortress. The wreckage of destroyed Velthari ships had been turned into defensive barriers. Human vessels, many of them clearly built from salvaged alien technology, patrolled in organized formations. Most shocking of all, Admiral Corvex was indeed in retreat. His once proud fleet of 50 ships had been reduced to just 12 battered survivors, limping away from Earth with their shields flickering and their hulls scarred by weapons that shouldn't have been able to touch them. Report, Admiral Zephyros demanded as soon as Corvex's ship docked with his flagship. Corvex looked like he had aged decades in just a few weeks. His normally perfect uniform was torn, and his eyes held a haunted expression that spoke of horrors beyond imagination. "They're not like the others," he said quietly. "Every species we've conquered before fought the way we expected them to fight. They used their own technology, followed their own tactics, made predictable mistakes. These humans, they don't follow any rules." Explain. "They steal our ships and learn to fly them better than we do. They hack into our communication systems and turn our own coordination against us. They take civilian vessels and convert them into weapons more dangerous than our warships. And worst of all, they adapt faster than we can counter them. Every time we develop a defense against their tactics, they've already moved on to something new." Admiral Zephyros studied the tactical data from the recent battles, his confidence beginning to waver. The humans had indeed been using captured Velthari technology, but they hadn't just copied it, they had improved it. Their hybrid ships combined alien power sources with human ingenuity, creating vessels that were somehow more effective than pure Dominion designs. Meanwhile on Earth, Colonel Junho Lee was working 18-hour days in the Cyber Warfare Command Center that had been hastily built beneath the ruins of Geneva. The facility was a maze of human computers connected to salvaged alien systems, creating a technological hybrid that would have been impossible just months before. Junho had been South Korea's top computer security expert before the invasion. He understood networks, encryption, and digital warfare better than almost anyone on Earth. But even he was amazed at what his team had managed to accomplish with alien technology. "The breakthrough came when we realized their communication systems work differently than ours," he explained to his team of programmers and hackers. "We send discrete messages back and forth. Their systems are more like a shared consciousness. Every ship in their fleet is constantly connected to every other ship, sharing information in real time." Captain Yuna Han, his best cryptography specialist, looked up from her workstation where lines of alien code scrolled across multiple screens. "Which means if we can break into their network, we don't just get access to one ship. We get access to their entire fleet." The hack took 3 days of constant work. Yuna and her team had to first understand how Velthari encryption worked, then figure out how to make their captured alien hardware talk to the enemy fleet without being detected. It was like trying to sneak into a conversation being held in a language you didn't speak, using a voice that wasn't yours. But when they finally broke through, the results were spectacular. "I'm in," Yuna announced, her voice tense with concentration. "I have access to their tactical network. Junho, I can see everything. Their ship positions, their planned movements, even their internal communications. Can you disrupt their coordination?" Junho asked. "Better than that, watch this." Yuna's fingers danced across her keyboard as she fed false information into the alien network. On the main tactical display, they could see the Velthari fleet beginning to move in response to the fake data she was sending. The first test was small. She made 3 enemy ships think they were under attack from a direction where no human forces existed. The alien vessels immediately began firing at empty space, wasting ammunition and revealing their positions to real human forces. But the real breakthrough came when Yuna figured out how to corrupt their targeting systems. "I'm feeding them false sensor data," she explained as she worked. "As far as their computers know, that ship over there is actually a human vessel, and that one is too." The result was chaos. 3 Velthari destroyers, following corrupted targeting information, opened fire on each other. The alien ship's own weapons, designed to punch through the strongest defenses, tore through their sister ships like they were made of paper. By the time the alien commanders realized what was happening, it was too late to stop the friendly fire. Admiral Zephyros watched in horror as his own ships destroyed each other. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our security systems are supposed to be unbreakable." But the humans weren't finished. Dr. Minho Kim, who had first detected the alien fleet months ago, had been working with the salvaged alien computers to unlock their deepest secrets. What he found in their databanks was intelligence beyond price. the locations of every Velthari fleet in the galaxy, their planned routes, their strategic objectives, even the location of their home worlds. "General Daehyun," he reported to the commander of Earth's Unified Defense Force, "we've hit the jackpot. I have the complete Velthari battle plans for this entire sector of the galaxy. We know where every one of their fleets is going to be for the next 6 months." General Daehyun studied the alien star charts with growing excitement. For months, humanity had been fighting a defensive war, reacting to alien attacks and trying to survive. Now, for the first time, they had the information they needed to go on the offensive. "Broadcast these positions to every human ship, every allied vessel, every resistance group in the galaxy," he ordered. "If the Velthari want to fight a war, we'll give them a war they'll never forget." Within hours, the intelligence was being transmitted across the galaxy through every communication satellite and deep space relay that humanity had access to. Other species that had been conquered by the Dominion suddenly found themselves with detailed information about enemy fleet movements. Resistance groups that had been fighting hopeless guerrilla campaigns now knew exactly when and where to strike. For maximum effect, the hunters had become the hunted. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Velthari found themselves fighting an enemy that could predict their moves, disrupt their communications, and turn their own technology against them. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted. Humanity had learned to fight with alien weapons, think with alien knowledge, and strike with inhuman fury. The Dominion was about to discover what happened when you awakened a sleeping giant with nothing left to lose. The main Velthari battle fleet arrived at Earth 6 months after the first invasion began. Supreme Admiral Velkanos, the Destroyer, commanded 300 of the Dominion's most powerful warships, enough firepower to crack a planet in half. He had come to personally oversee what should have been a simple cleanup operation, putting down a minor rebellion by primitive humans. What he found instead defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. Earth no longer looked like the defenseless blue world his scouts had reported. The planet was surrounded by a massive ring of debris, the twisted remains of dozens of Velthari ships that had been destroyed in previous battles. But the humans hadn't just left the wreckage floating in space. They had turned it into a defensive network, welding pieces together into orbital fortresses, bristling with hybrid weapons that combined alien technology with human engineering. The moon itself had been transformed into a military base. Its surface was covered with launch pads, weapon platforms, and massive railguns that could hurl projectiles at near light speed. Communication arrays made from salvaged Velthari crystals allowed Earth's defenders to coordinate their forces across the entire solar system. Most shocking of all were the ships that came out to meet his fleet. They were clearly of Velthari design, but they had been modified in ways that made Velkanos feel sick to his stomach. Human engineers had taken the elegant, artistic curves of Dominion vessels and covered them with crude but effective armor. Plating. Beautiful crystalline hulls were studded with ugly human weapon systems. It was like watching someone take a priceless work of art and turn it into a club. Admiral Sunmi Lee stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Soul rising, and felt a mix of pride and sadness as she looked at her fleet. 6 months ago, she had been commanding human naval vessels that seemed primitive compared to alien technology. Now she was in charge of 50 captured Velthari ships, each one crewed by humans who had learned to operate alien systems through sheer determination and necessity. The Soul Rising itself was a perfect example of human adaptability. It had originally been a Velthari battlecruiser, sleek and beautiful, designed for swift strikes and elegant maneuvers, but her engineers had stripped out the interior and rebuilt it from scratch. The result was ugly, but deadly effective. A ship that combined the speed and power of alien technology with the rugged durability of human engineering. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "the alien fleet is requesting our surrender. They're offering to spare the planet if we give up now." Sunmi almost laughed. After everything humanity had been through, after Geneva, after all the battles and sacrifices, did they really think humans would just give up? "Open a channel to all ships, both human and alien." She took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone, knowing that her words would be heard across the entire solar system. "This is Admiral Sunmi Lee of the Earth Defense Force. 6 months ago, you came to our home uninvited. You demanded our surrender. You murdered 200,000 innocent people to make a point about resistance. You thought we would break. You thought we would beg for mercy. You were wrong." Her voice grew harder as she continued. "We are human beings. We don't surrender our freedom to anyone. We don't bow down to bullies, no matter how powerful they think they are. And we sure as hell don't forget when someone hurts our family. If you want Earth, you're going to have to take it from us. And we promise you, that's going to cost you more than you're willing to pay." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic warfare. The Velthari had expected to face desperate but futile resistance from a technologically inferior species. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that used their own weapons against them, that had learned to outthink their tactical computers, and that fought with a savage determination that chilled even veteran warriors. Human ships performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They used their vessels like guided missiles, ramming enemy ships at full speed without regard for their own survival. They converted civilian spacecraft into kinetic weapons, loading cargo ships with explosives and driving them straight into alien formations. Most terrifying of all, they coordinated their attacks with a precision that suggested they understood Velthari tactics better than the aliens themselves. Captain Yunha Nam had been fighting in her converted cargo ship, the D. Inchan's Pride, for 6 months. Her vessel had been hit dozens of times, patched back together with salvaged parts, and modified so many times that it barely resembled the peaceful cargo hauler it had once been. Half her crew was wounded, her hull was leaking atmosphere in 3 places, and her main engines were running on backup power. But she wasn't done fighting. "Captain," her engineer Tewu reported, "we've lost main weapons, secondary weapons, and most of our defensive systems. Life support is failing, and we have maybe 20 minutes of air left." Yunha looked at the tactical display, where Admiral Korvex's flagship sat in the center of the alien formation, its shields glowing as it directed the battle. That ship had been there when Geneva was destroyed. Its weapons had vaporized 200,000 innocent people in an instant. "Set course for the alien flagship," she ordered. "Maximum speed, everything we've got left." "Captain, that's suicide," Tewu protested. "Maybe," Yunha replied, "but it's suicide with a purpose. Load every remaining explosive we have into the forward cargo bay. We're going to ram that ship and show them what happens when you mess with Earth." The Inchan's Pride limped toward the alien flagship, its damaged engines leaving a trail of plasma and debris. To the Velthari, it looked like a crippled ship trying to retreat. They didn't realize their mistake until it was far too late. Admiral Korvex was standing on his command bridge, watching the battle unfold, when his tactical officer suddenly shouted a warning. "Sir, that human vessel, it's on a collision course." Korvex turned to look at the main display just in time to see the battered human ship bearing down on his flagship. He could actually see through the transparent sections of the human vessel's hull, could see the crew members at their stations, calmly working, even though they knew they were about to die. "All weapons target that ship," he ordered desperately. "Destroy it before it reaches us." But it was too late. The Inchan's Pride, loaded with every explosive device its crew could find, struck Korvex's flagship at nearly the speed of light. The explosion that followed lit up the entire solar system like a miniature sun. Both ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant of unimaginable energy. The death of their supreme commander broke the alien fleet's coordination. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Velthari found themselves leaderless in the middle of a battle. Some ships tried to continue fighting, others attempted to retreat, and a few simply drifted in space as their crews struggled to understand what had just happened. Supreme Admiral Velkanos, commanding from his own flagship, stared at the expanding cloud of plasma where 2 ships had been just moments before. In 400 years of military service, he had never seen anything like what these humans had just done. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to make sure their enemies paid the highest possible price for victory. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving casualty reports from across the fleet. We've lost over 100 ships, and many more are heavily damaged. The humans are preparing for another attack wave." Velkanos looked at the Achul tactical display, where human ships were regrouping for what would clearly be another savage assault. His fleet still outnumbered the humans, but he was beginning to understand something that chilled him to the bone. Numbers didn't matter to these creatures. They would keep fighting until every last human was dead, and they would take as many Velthari with them as possible. "Signal the fleet," he ordered quietly. "We're withdrawing." "Sir?" his second-in-command asked in shock. "We're retreating." "We're surviving," Velkanos corrected. "There's a difference between tactical withdrawal and genocide, and these humans are pushing us toward the latter." As the alien fleet prepared to jump away from Earth's solar system, humanity broadcast one final message to the galaxy. It was transmitted on every frequency, in every language known to galactic civilization, and it carried a promise that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. This is Earth. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not forget. We do not forgive unprovoked attacks on our people. To any species considering aggression against us, remember Geneva, remember this battle, and ask yourselves if conquest is worth the price we will make you pay. We are small, we are young, but we are not helpless, and we are very, very angry. The Velthari survivors returned to Dominion space with a warning that spread throughout their empire. There was a species in the galaxy that preferred extinction to subjugation, and they had just announced themselves to the universe with the blood of those who had underestimated them. In the ruins where Geneva had once stood, humanity built a memorial with a simple inscription that captured everything the galaxy needed to know about the human spirit. They thought fury was their weapon. They learned it was ours.